The Ultimatum. The sky darkened over New York City as an enormous shadow crept across the gleaming skyscrapers. Traffic screeched to a halt, and pedestrians froze mid-stride, their eyes drawn upward in collective awe and terror. A massive, disc-shaped object, easily the size of Central Park, hovered silently above the city. Similar scenes unfolded simultaneously in major cities across the globe. London, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing, Rio de Janeiro, all found themselves beneath the imposing presence of these otherworldly vessels. In the heart of Washington, D.C., President Evelyn Carter stood in the Oval Office, her normally composed demeanor shaken as she watched the live feeds from around the world. The alien ships had appeared without warning, somehow evading every early detection system humanity possessed. Madam President, her Chief of Staff, Marcus Reed, burst into the room, his face ashen. "We're receiving a transmission. It's from them." Before President Carter could respond, every screen in the room flickered to life. The image that appeared was not what anyone expected. Instead of some grotesque alien visage, they saw a being that looked remarkably human. Tall, slender, with iridescent skin and eyes that seemed to hold galaxies within them. "People of Earth," the being spoke, its voice a melodious yet unsettling harmony. "We are the Zarkonian Collective. Your planet now falls under our domain. You have 24 of your Earth hours to surrender unconditionally. Failure to comply will result in your extinction." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving a deafening silence in its wake. President Carter's mind raced. 24 hours. How could they possibly prepare for whatever these aliens had in store in just one day? She turned to Marcus, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Get me the Joint Chiefs now, and connect me with every world leader available. We need a united front." As chaos erupted in the streets outside, a different scene was unfolding in a small, cluttered laboratory on the outskirts of Boston. Dr. Samantha Chen, a brilliant but often overlooked quantum physicist, stared at her computer screen in disbelief. The data flowing across it made no sense, or rather, it made too much sense. "This can't be right," she muttered, pushing her glasses up her nose. The energy readings from the alien ships were unlike anything she'd ever seen, yet they corresponded perfectly with her theoretical models on interdimensional travel. Her phone buzzed incessantly, colleagues, friends, family, all seeking answers or comfort. But Samantha's focus remained on the numbers before her. There was something here, something that could be the key to understanding these visitors, and possibly saving humanity. Halfway across the world, in a bustling market in New Delhi, Arjun Patel felt the weight of his family's expectations as heavily as the alien ship looming overhead. At 19, he was a prodigy in the field of linguistics and cryptography, currently juggling his studies with helping at his parents' spice stall. As panic spread through the market, Arjun's mind was elsewhere. The alien's message, brief as it was, contained patterns he couldn't ignore. The syntax, the vocal modulations, there was something familiar yet profoundly alien about it all. He needed to analyze it further. "Arjun." His father's voice cut through his thoughts. "Stop daydreaming and help secure the stall. We're closing early today." Arjun nodded absently, his hands moving automatically to pack up their wares while his mind continued to dissect the alien's words. Back in Washington, the Situation Room was a hive of frantic activity. Military leaders, scientists, and politicians argued over courses of action, their voices rising with each passing minute. "We need to launch a preemptive strike," General Howard thundered, his fist slamming onto the table. "With what?" Dr. Emily Sato, the lead scientist present, countered. "Our most advanced weapons are likely centuries behind our technology. We'd be throwing pebbles at a tank." President Carter raised her hand, silencing the room. "We need options, people. Real, viable options. This isn't just about America. This is about the survival of our entire species." As the debate raged on, a young lieutenant burst into the room. Madam President, we're detecting energy buildups in the alien ships. They're targeting our major military installations worldwide." The room fell silent, the weight of impending doom settling over them all. Thousands of miles away, in the Australian outback, Jack Thompson, a grizzled veteran turned hermit, watched the alien ship hovering over Sydney through his old military-grade binoculars. Unlike the panic gripping most of the world, Jack felt a strange calm. He'd seen war, experienced the worst humanity had to offer, and come out the other side. These aliens, for all their advanced technology, were just another enemy. And if there was one thing Jack knew, it was that every enemy had a weakness. As the 24-hour deadline ticked away, humanity faced its greatest test. In labs, in war rooms, in homes and shelters across the globe, people grappled with the reality of their situation. Some prayed, some plotted, some despaired, but in pockets around the world, a spark of defiance began to ignite. Dr. Samantha Chen, fueled by caffeine and determination, worked tirelessly in her lab. The equations were starting to make sense, revealing possibilities that defied conventional physics. If she was right, the very thing that made these aliens so powerful could be turned against them. In New Delhi, Arjun Patel had snuck away from his family's crowded shelter, seeking solitude to work on decoding the alien message. His fingers flew over his laptop keyboard, complex algorithms taking shape as he sought patterns in the alien language. President Carter, her resolve hardening with each passing hour, coordinated a global response unlike anything in human history. Ancient rivalries were set aside, classified technologies shared, as humanity united against a common threat. Jack Thompson, driven by instincts honed through years of combat, began a journey towards Sydney. He didn't know what he could do against such an overwhelming force, but he knew he had to try. As the deadline approached its final hours, a plan began to take shape, a desperate, audacious plan that would require the best of what humanity had to offer. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. In New York City, where it had all begun, a young artist named Zoe Rivera stood on the roof of her apartment building, staring up at the alien ship. In her hands, she clutched a sketchbook filled with drawings, impressions of the ship, of the fear and hope she saw in her fellow New Yorkers, of the future she desperately wanted to see. As the sun began to set on this pivotal day in human history, Zoe made a decision. She would not cower in fear. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same creativity and passion she poured into her art. And in that moment, without realizing it, she embodied the very spirit that might just save humanity. The clock ticked down, the alien ships hummed with building energy, and across the globe, humanity prepared to fight for its very existence. The next 24 hours would determine the fate of our species and reveal the true strength of the human spirit. Humanity's defiance. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, humanity awoke to a world forever changed. The Zarkonian ships loomed overhead, silent sentinels counting down the hours until their ultimatum expired. But in the face of this overwhelming threat, something remarkable began to unfold. In Washington, D.C., President Evelyn Carter addressed the nation, her voice broadcast to every corner of the globe. "My fellow citizens of Earth," she began, her tone resolute. "We face a threat unlike any in human history, but we will not surrender. We will not go quietly into the night. Today, we stand united, not as nations, but as one human race." Her words resonated across continents, igniting a spark of defiance in hearts worldwide. In an unprecedented move, world leaders set aside decades-old grudges, pooling resources and knowledge in a desperate bid for survival. At MIT, Dr. Samantha Chen's laboratory had become the epicenter of a scientific revolution. Her theories on interdimensional energy had caught the attention of the global scientific community, and now her small lab was filled with some of the brightest minds from around the world. "The Zarkonian ships," Samantha explained, gesturing to a holographic model. "They're not just traveling through space. They're manipulating the fabric of reality itself." She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. But here's the thing. Their interdimensional drive leaves a unique energy signature. If we can replicate it, we could disrupt their systems, finished Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a renowned physicist from Tokyo University. The room buzzed with excitement as the scientists began to brainstorm. Their collective genius focused on a single goal. Meanwhile, in New Delhi, Arjun Patel had made a breakthrough of his own. Huddled in a makeshift command center, he presented his findings to a group of military officials and linguists. "It's not just a language," Arjun explained, his eyes bright with discovery. "The Zarkonian message is also a code. Hidden within their ultimatum is a complex mathematical sequence." He pulled up a series of equations on a large screen. These numbers, their coordinates, specific points in spacetime where their ships are most vulnerable. General Rajesh Sharma leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Are you saying we could potentially target these points?" Arjun nodded, a mix of excitement and fear in his voice. "If Dr. Chen's team can develop a way to manipulate interdimensional energy, and we can pinpoint these vulnerabilities, we might have a fighting chance," the general finished, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. As scientists and strategists worked tirelessly, a different kind of resistance was taking shape on the streets. In New York City, Zoe Rivera had turned her art into a rallying cry. Her vivid murals depicting humanity's strength and unity against the alien threat began appearing on buildings overnight, inspiring hope and courage in all who saw them. What started as one artist's defiance soon became a global movement. Street artists in Rio de Janeiro, poets in Paris, musicians in Lagos, creators around the world used their talents to boost morale and unite people in the face of annihilation. This cultural resistance didn't go unnoticed by the Zarkonians. Their ships began emitting a low-frequency pulse, an attempt to dampen human spirits and sow discord. But they had underestimated the human capacity for adaptability and creativity. In Sydney, Jack Thompson's military experience proved invaluable. He'd noticed the effects of the alien pulse and had been working with local engineers to develop a countermeasure. Using scavenged electronics and his knowledge of sonic warfare, they created makeshift devices to neutralize the Zarkonian influence. "It ain't pretty," Jack grunted as he distributed the crude-looking devices to a group of volunteers. "But it'll keep your heads clear. Spread the word, show others how to make them. We need everyone thinking straight for what's coming." As Jack's invention spread, aided by online tutorials and word of mouth, communities worldwide found themselves better able to resist the alien psychological warfare. The human spirit, once again, proved remarkably resilient. With less than 12 hours remaining, President Carter convened an emergency session of the newly formed Global Defense Council. Representatives from every nation huddled around screens, their faces grim but determined. "Dr. Chen," the president began, "what's the status of Project Pushback?" Samantha took a deep breath before responding. "We've made significant progress, Madam President, by combining our interdimensional energy generator with Arjun Patel's decoded coordinates. We believe we can create a disruption field that will severely impact the Zarkonian ships." "But," President Carter prompted, sensing the hesitation in Samantha's voice. "But we've only got one shot at this. The energy requirements are astronomical. We'll need to divert power from every major grid on the planet, and even then, we can't be certain of the consequences. The laws of physics as we understand them, well, they're more like guidelines when dealing with interdimensional energy." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They were betting the fate of humanity on an untested theory and a decoded alien message. General Howard, the same man who had earlier advocated for a preemptive strike, spoke up. "It's a risk we have to take, but we can't put all our eggs in one basket. We need a backup plan." Jack Thompson's gruff voice cut through the tension. "I might have something." All eyes turned to the screen showing the veteran. "These aliens, they're not invincible. Their pulse weapons, their communication, It all operates on principles we can understand and counter. We've been so focused on matching their tech that we've forgotten our greatest strength. And what's that, Mr. Thompson? The president asked. A wry smile crossed Jack's weathered face. Improvisation, ma'am. Good old human ingenuity. While the eggheads work on their big plan, we can organize a ground resistance. Low-tech, unpredictable, the kind of thing these aliens won't see coming. The idea caught fire. As the scientists fine-tuned Project Pushback, a parallel effort began to mobilize a global guerrilla resistance. Everyday items were repurposed into weapons and countermeasures. Zoe's art movement evolved, using hidden symbols to communicate resistance plans past the alien surveillance. In the final hours before the deadline, humanity was a hive of activity. Power plants worldwide prepared for the energy diversion needed for Project Pushback. Samantha and her team made final adjustments to their interdimensional disruptor, the device humming with potential that could either save or doom them all. Arjun worked feverishly, double and triple checking his calculations. The weight of billions of lives rested on his young shoulders, but he refused to buckle under the pressure. Jack and his growing network of resistance fighters took up positions around the world, armed with a motley assortment of jerry-rigged weapons and an unbreakable spirit. Zoe put the finishing touches on her largest mural yet, a massive multi-story depiction of humanity rising up, diverse yet united, in the face of the alien threat. As she stepped back to view her work, a crowd gathered, drawing strength from the powerful imagery. In Washington, President Carter prepared to address the world one final time before the Zirconian deadline expired. As she stepped up to the podium, she felt the weight of history on her shoulders. The next few hours would determine the fate of their species. Citizens of Earth, she began, her voice steady and resolute. In a few short hours, we face a moment that will define our species. The Zirconians demanded our surrender. Instead, we offer them our defiance. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the camera lenses, knowing her words were reaching every corner of the globe. We may be outgunned, we may be facing technology beyond our comprehension, but we possess something the Zirconians cannot match, the indomitable human spirit. In labs and in streets, in offices and in homes, I have witnessed the very best of humanity. We have united as never before, pooling our knowledge, our resources, our courage. Whatever happens in the coming hours, know this, we face it together as one human family. To the Zirconians, I say this, you gave us 24 hours to surrender. Instead, we use that time to show you, and ourselves, what humanity is truly capable of. You may have traveled across the stars to reach us, but you will find that the human spirit is a force that cannot be conquered. As President Carter's speech concluded, a roar of defiance rose from crowds gathered around the world. In New York, Zoe led a chant that spread through the streets. In Sydney, Jack and his resistance fighters raised their makeshift weapons in salute. In New Delhi, Arjun stepped away from his computers to join the crowds, feeling for the first time the true weight of what they were fighting for. And in her lab in Boston, Samantha Chen took a deep breath, her hand hovering over the switch that would activate Project Pushback. The fate of humanity rested on the next moment. Above, the Zirconian ships began to pulse with energy. The deadline had arrived. Humanity's time was up. The true test was about to begin. The battle begins. As the final second of the Zirconian ultimatum ticked away, an eerie silence fell across the globe. It lasted only a moment before the sky erupted in a dazzling, terrifying display of power. Beams of searing energy lanced down from the alien ships, targeting military installations, power plants, and communication hubs. The Zirconians had made good on their threat, unleashing a devastating first strike against Earth's defenses. In the chaos of those first few minutes, it seemed as though all hope was lost. But humanity had not been idle during those 24 hours, and now their preparations were put to the ultimate test. In her lab in Boston, Dr. Samantha Chen's voice cut through the din of alarms and panicked shouts. Initiate project pushback. Now. With a decisive motion, she activated the interdimensional disruptor. The device hummed to life, drawing an unprecedented amount of power from grids across the planet. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a wave of distortion rippled outward, invisible to the naked eye, but unmistakable in its effects. The Zarkonian ships shuddered, their energy beams flickering and wavering. Several of the smaller vessels spiraled out of control, crashing into uninhabited areas. The larger ships, including the massive one over New York, managed to stabilize, but it was clear they had been caught off guard. "It's working," Samantha exclaimed, her eyes wide as she watched the data stream across her monitors. The disruption field is interfering with their interdimensional drives. But their victory was short-lived. The Zarkonians, quickly adapting to this unexpected resistance, shifted their tactics. Their ships began to descend, closing the distance to Earth's surface and minimizing the effect of the disruption field. As alien craft broke through the cloud cover, humanity's ground forces sprang into action. In Sydney, Jack Thompson led a ragtag group of resistance fighters armed with their improvised weapons. "Remember," Jack shouted over the din of battle, "aim for their sensor arrays. They can't hit what they can't see." His team launched a barrage of makeshift electromagnetic pulse devices, cobbled together from old microwaves and scavenged electronics. The pulses played havoc with the Zarkonian ship's navigation systems, causing several to collide with buildings or each other. Similar scenes unfolded in cities around the world. The alien invaders, expecting an easy conquest, found themselves embroiled in thousands of small-scale skirmishes against a determined and unpredictable enemy. In New Delhi, Arjun Patel had transformed from a brilliant but shy student into a crucial tactical asset. Working from a fortified bunker, he coordinated with resistance cells worldwide, using his deep understanding of Zarkonian communications to predict their movements and exploit their vulnerabilities. "They're regrouping over the Indian Ocean," Arjun reported, his fingers flying over his keyboard. "If we can disrupt their formation there, we might buy more time for Dr. Chen to refine the disruption field." President Carter, now operating from a mobile command center as Washington lay in ruins, made a difficult decision. "Divert all available naval forces to the Indian Ocean. We need to keep them scattered." As warships and submarines converged on the alien fleet, a different kind of battle was unfolding in the streets of New York. Zoe Rivera, her clothes spattered with paint and dust, led a group of civilians in a daring mission. "The aliens are using Central Park as a landing zone," she explained, sketching a quick map on a crumbled wall. "We need to make it impossible for them to land more ships." Her plan was audacious and quintessentially human. Using trucks, cars, and anything else they could move, Zoe's team began creating a massive, chaotic art installation across the park. Structures of twisted metal and vibrant color rose from the green space, beautiful and baffling to the alien sensors. As Zarkonian shuttles attempted to land, they found themselves entangled in a web of human creativity. The confusion this caused bought precious time for military forces to regroup and counterattack. Back in her lab, Samantha Chen worked feverishly to enhance the disruption field. The initial success had given them hope, but the Zarkonians were adapting faster than anticipated. "We need more power," she muttered, running simulations on her battered computer. "If we could just increase the field's intensity." Her thoughts were interrupted by a violent tremor that shook the building. A Zarkonian fighter, crippled by the ongoing battle, was plummeting towards the lab. "Evacuate," Samantha yelled, grabbing her most crucial data drives. As her team rushed for the exits, she cast one last look at the interdimensional disruptor. There wasn't time to move it. The impact was devastating. As the dust settled, Samantha emerged from the rubble, coughing and disoriented. The lab was destroyed, along with their primary weapon against the Zarkonian threat. "Dr. Chen." A voice crackled over her emergency communicator. It was President Carter. What's the status of Project Pushback? Samantha's heart sank as she surveyed the destruction. It's gone, Madam President. The lab, the disruptor, it's all destroyed. A heavy silence followed. When the president spoke again, her voice was filled with grim determination. Then we do this the hard way. All forces, engage with everything we've got. We're in this fight to the last. As word spread of the destruction of Project Pushback, a wave of despair threatened to overwhelm the human resistance. But in pockets around the globe, that despair transformed into a fierce primal determination. In Sydney, Jack Thompson rallied his fighters. They think they got us beat. Let's show these alien bastards what humans do best. We adapt, we overcome. His team, using knowledge gained from earlier skirmishes, began targeting specific weak points on the Zarkonian craft. What they lacked in firepower, they made up for in precision and sheer audacity. In New Delhi, Arjun Patel made a startling discovery. The Zarkonian communication network, he exclaimed. It's not just for coordination. It's integral to their weapons systems. Working with a team of hackers from around the world, Arjun launched a desperate cyber assault on the alien fleet. They couldn't match the Zarkonians' advanced technology, but they could introduce chaos into their systems. Across the planet, Zarkonian ships began to fire erratically, sometimes even at each other. It wasn't a decisive blow, but it bought precious time and boosted morale among the beleaguered human forces. In New York, Zoe Rivera's artistic resistance had evolved. Using her network of artists and creators, she coordinated a series of massive light and sound installations across the city. These displays, beautiful to human eyes, created a disorienting environment for the Zarkonian ground forces, whose sensory systems were attuned differently from humans. Art isn't just expression, Zoe shouted to her team as they set up another installation. It's a weapon, a shield, and a beacon of hope. As the battle raged on, both sides suffered heavy losses. Zarkonian ships fell from the sky, leveling city blocks. Human military bases were reduced to smoldering craters. The planet itself seemed to groan under the strain of the conflict, with earthquakes and storms adding to the chaos. In the midst of this apocalyptic scenario, Samantha Chen refused to give up. Retrieving what she could from the ruins of her lab, she began working on a daring, possibly suicidal plan. The interdimensional disruptor was too big, too static. She explained to a group of fellow scientists over a patchy video call. But what if we could create smaller, mobile versions? Devices that could be deployed directly against individual Zarkonian ships. It was a long shot, but in a war where humanity was outgunned and outmatched, long shots were all they had left. As the first day of open conflict drew to a close, the situation looked grim for humanity. Major cities lay in ruins, millions were dead or displaced, and the Zarkonian forces, despite setbacks, still held air superiority across much of the globe. Yet, against all odds, humanity had survived the initial onslaught. More than that, they had bloodied the nose of an enemy that had expected an easy conquest. In her mobile command center, President Carter prepared another address to the nations of Earth. Her face was streaked with soot, her suit torn and dirty, but her eyes burned with an unquenchable fire. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice carrying to every functioning communication device on the planet. "We have endured a day unlike any in our history. We have faced an enemy of unimaginable power and cruelty. We have suffered losses that will scar our world for generations to come." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "But we are still here. We are still fighting. From the ashes of our cities, from the depths of our despair, we rise, united as one human family. We say to the Zarkonians and to the universe itself, this is our home, and we will defend it to the last breath, to the last heartbeat." As her words echoed across a battered but unbroken earth, humanity steeled itself for the battles to come. The war was far from over, and its outcome remained uncertain. But in laboratories and bunkers, in the streets of ruined cities, and the fields of devastated countrysides, a spark of hope refused to die. The Zarkonians had given humanity 24 hours to surrender. Instead, humanity had given them a war they would never forget, turning the tide. As the sun rose on the second day of the Zarkonian invasion, the extent of the devastation became clear. Major cities around the world lay in ruins, smoke rising from countless fires that painted the sky in shades of gray and orange. Yet, amidst the destruction, the indomitable human spirit continued to flicker and grow. In the remnants of her lab in Boston, Dr. Samantha Chen worked tirelessly on her new project. Surrounded by a team of volunteers, engineers, physicists, and even a few talented high school students, she was in the process of creating something revolutionary. "Hand me that quantum oscillator," she called out, her eyes never leaving the intricate device taking shape before her. "If this works, we'll be able to disrupt the Zarkonians' interdimensional fields on a localized scale." The device, which they had started calling the Pocket Pusher, was a miniaturized version of the original interdimensional disruptor. It was designed to be portable, allowing resistance fighters to take the fight directly to individual Zarkonian ships. Across the Atlantic, in the underground bunkers of London, Arjun Patel had made a breakthrough of his own. His tireless work on decoding Zarkonian communications had yielded unexpected fruit. "It's not just a language," he explained excitedly to the British military officials gathered around him. "Their entire command structure is based on these mathematical sequences. If we can introduce the right kind of noise into their network, we could potentially disrupt their entire chain of command," finished General Emily Thorne, her eyes widening at the implications. As Arjun and his team of international hackers worked on their cyber offensive, Jack Thompson was leading a daring raid in Sydney. Intelligence had identified a crashed Zarkonian scout ship on the outskirts of the city, relatively intact and unguarded. "Remember," Jack growled to his team as they approached the alien craft, "we're not here to fight. Get in, grab everything we can, and get out." This tech could be the key to turning this war around. The raid was a success, with Jack's team managing to salvage crucial components of the Zarkonian ship's propulsion and weapon systems. As they sped away from the crash site, alien reinforcements hot on their heels, Jack allowed himself a grim smile. They had just leveled the playing field, even if only a little. Meanwhile, in the ruins of New York City, Zoe Rivera had transformed her artistic resistance into a full-blown psychological warfare operation. Using salvaged projectors and speakers, her team created massive illusions that confounded Zarkonian forces. Holographic human armies appeared and disappeared, leading alien squads into ambushes. Sound installations disoriented the invaders, whose auditory senses were much more acute than humans. Zoe's art had become a weapon, one that the Zarkonians struggled to counteract. "Art isn't just about beauty," Zoe told a group of new recruits, her voice fierce with conviction. "It's about communication, about making people, or aliens, see the world differently. And right now, we're going to make these invaders see nothing but chaos." As these individual efforts began to bear fruit, President Carter coordinated a global counteroffensive from her mobile command center. The plan was audacious, relying on the simultaneous deployment of every new technology and tactic humanity had developed. "All units, prepare for Operation Slingshot," Carter's voice crackled over secure channels worldwide. "We may be David to their Goliath, but remember, David won." The operation began at dawn. In Boston, Samantha Chen and her team activated their network of pocket pushers. All across the globe, resistance fighters armed with these devices approached Zarkonian ships. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Alien vessels, suddenly cut off from their interdimensional power sources, plummeted from the sky or careened wildly, crashing into each other. Simultaneously, Arjun Patel launched his cyber attack. The Zarkonian command network erupted into chaos, with conflicting orders and false information spreading through their ranks. Alien ground forces, suddenly without coherent leadership, fell into disarray. In Australia, Jack Thompson led a team of engineers in incorporating salvaged Zarkonian technology into human weapons systems. For the first time since the invasion began, human fighters were able to go toe-to-toe with alien craft in the skies. And in cities around the world, inspired by Zoe Rivera's tactics, civilians turned their creativity into a weapon. Flash mobs appeared and disappeared, confusing alien sensors. Makeshift holograms and sound systems turned urban environments into baffling labyrinths for the invaders. The Zarkonians, faced with this multi-pronged assault, began to falter. Their carefully laid plans of conquest crumbled in the face of human unpredictability and adaptability. But the alien leaders were not about to admit defeat so easily. In a desperate move, the Zarkonian flagship over New York began to power up its main weapon, a device capable of splitting the Earth's crust. It was a last resort, a threat to destroy the planet if humanity didn't surrender immediately. As energy readings from the alien ship spiked to unprecedented levels, President Carter faced the most difficult decision of her life. "We need to take out that ship," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of billions of lives. "Whatever the cost." Samantha Chen, monitoring the situation from Boston, realized with a sinking heart what needed to be done. "I can overload our entire network of pocket pushers," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Create a disruption field so powerful it would tear that ship apart. But the feedback would likely destroy every major power grid on the planet. We'd be thrust back into the Dark Ages." There was a moment of heavy silence as the implications sank in. Then President Carter spoke, her voice firm. "Do it, Dr. Chen. Humanity rebuilt from the ashes once. We can do it again." As Samantha began the overload sequence, a desperate plan was forming in New York. Zoe Rivera, having heard the transmission, realized that someone needed to get close to the Zarkonian flagship to ensure the disruption field hit its target. "I need volunteers," she called out to her team. "This is going to be a one-way trip, but it might just save our world." To her surprise, dozens stepped forward without hesitation. Among them was a familiar face, Jack Thompson, who had arrived with a team of Australian fighters to support the New York resistance. "Figured you could use some help, Sheila," he said with a grim smile. "Let's show these aliens what humanity's really made of." As Samantha's finger hovered over the button that would trigger the overload, as Zoe and Jack led their team towards the Zarkonian flagship, as President Carter prepared the world for what was to come, a strange calm settled over the planet. In this moment, facing extinction, humanity stood united as never before. From the trenches of Europe to the mountains of Asia, from the deserts of Africa to the plains of the Americas, people of all races, religions, and nationalities held their breath, their hopes riding on this final, desperate gambit. Samantha Chen closed her eyes and pressed the button. Across the globe, the pocket pushers began to overload, creating a cascading wave of interdimensional energy that rushed towards New York. Zoe Rivera and Jack Thompson, leading their brave volunteers, had reached the base of the Zarkonian flagship. Using grappling hooks and sheer determination, they began to climb, even as the ship's weapon reached critical power levels. In her command center, President Carter watched the unfolding events with a mixture of hope and dread. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "let it be known that humanity did not go gentle into that good night." As the disruption wave hit New York, as Zoe and Jack reached the hull of the alien ship, as power grids across the planet began to fail, the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The Zarkonians had given Earth 24 hours to surrender. Instead, humanity had given them a war that would reshape the cosmos. In that moment of crisis, with the future uncertain, one thing became clear. The human spirit, tested to its very limits, had proven itself to be the most powerful force in the universe. The Zarkonian flagship began to shudder, caught in the grip of the massive disruption field. Cracks appeared in its hull, energy arcing wildly across its surface. Zoe, Jack, and their team clung desperately to the ship's exterior. knowing that their proximity was ensuring the effectiveness of the attack, even as it sealed their fate. As the alien vessel began to break apart, as the skies over every major city on Earth went dark, as humanity collectively held its breath, a new chapter in the history of our species was about to be written. The cost had been enormous, but in the face of extinction, humanity had discovered strengths it never knew it possessed. The battle was ending, but the true test of human resilience was just beginning. Triumph of the human spirit. The world held its breath as the Zarkonian flagship over New York City began to disintegrate. The overloaded network of pocket pushers had created an interdimensional disruption field of unprecedented power, tearing the massive alien vessel apart from the inside out. Zoe Rivera and Jack Thompson, along with their brave team of volunteers, clung to the disintegrating hull of the ship. They had accomplished their mission, ensuring the disruption field hit its target, but at a terrible cost. As the flagship began to break apart in earnest, Zoe caught Jack's eye. No words were needed. Their shared look conveyed a lifetime of emotions. Pride, fear, and a grim satisfaction at a job well done. Just as it seemed their sacrifice was inevitable, a blinding light engulfed them. In the last moments before the ship's destruction, the Zarkonians' emergency teleportation system activated, scattering the human heroes across the city below. Zoe found herself sprawled on the cracked pavement of Times Square, battered and bruised, but amazingly alive. As she struggled to her feet, she saw the enormous alien ship split in two, its remnants crashing into the Hudson River in a spectacular explosion of light and energy. Similar scenes unfolded around the globe. From Sydney to London, Moscow to Rio de Janeiro, the Zarkonian ships faltered and fell. The simultaneous overload of the pocket pushers had created a planet-wide disruption field that the alien invaders simply couldn't withstand. But victory came at a steep price. As predicted, power grids across the planet failed catastrophically. Cities that had once shone like beacons in the night were plunged into darkness. The world's technological infrastructure, already battered by days of war, now lay in ruins. In the eerie silence that followed the aliens' defeat, humanity faced a new challenge: survival in a post-technological world. Dr. Samantha Chen emerged from the remains of her lab in Boston, blinking in the harsh sunlight. The city around her was quiet, devoid of the usual hum of electricity and the buzz of modern life. As she surveyed the scene, a mix of emotions washed over her: relief at their victory, guilt over the consequences of her actions, and a steely determination to help rebuild. Thousands of miles away, in the pitch-black tunnels beneath New Delhi, Arjun Patel and his team of hackers were already adapting to the new reality. Using hand-crank generators and salvaged equipment, they began the monumental task of rebuilding the world's communication networks from scratch. "We did it before," Arjun said, his voice filled with quiet confidence. "We sent messages across continents with nothing but wires and simple codes. We can do it again." In her mobile command center, now nothing more than a powerless husk of metal, President Carter prepared to address what remained of the global communication network. Using a jury-rigged radio transmitter, she spoke to a world forever changed. "My fellow citizens of Earth, we have endured the unthinkable and emerged victorious. The Zarkonian threat has been neutralized, but at a great cost. We now face a world without the technology we've come to rely on, a world that will challenge us in ways we can scarcely imagine. But remember this: it is not our tools that make us human, but our spirit, our resilience, and our capacity for hope." As her words crackled across salvaged radios and hastily reassembled transmission networks, people around the world began to emerge from shelters, to take stock of their new reality, and to reach out to one another. In New York, Zoe Rivera wasted no time in organizing recovery efforts. Her artist's eye, which had proven so valuable in confounding the alien invaders, now turned to the task of reimagining a city without electricity. Solar reflectors were constructed to light public spaces, while teams of cyclists powered generators for essential services. "We're not just rebuilding," Zoe explained to a group of volunteers, her eyes bright with vision. "We're reinventing. This is our chance to create a world that's more sustainable, more equitable, more human." Jack Thompson, having survived the destruction of the Zarkonian flagship, found himself leading a team of engineers and former resistance fighters in Sydney. Their goal was to reverse engineer the alien technology they had salvaged before the final battle. "We've got a unique opportunity here," Jack said, gesturing to the assortment of alien devices spread before him. "We can rebuild our world, but better, smarter. These Zarkonian gadgets might just help us create a society that's more in harmony with our planet." As the immediate shock of victory wore off, humanity faced the monumental task of rebuilding civilization. But something had changed in the crucible of invasion and resistance. Old rivalries and conflicts seemed petty in the face of what they had endured together. A new sense of global unity emerged, born from shared struggle and triumph. Samantha Chen found herself at the forefront of this new world order. Her expertise in interdimensional physics, combined with what they had learned from Zarkonian technology, opened up new frontiers of scientific understanding. "We're not just replacing what we lost," she explained to a gathering of international scientists, many of whom had traveled for weeks to attend the conference. "We're leapfrogging ahead, combining the best of human ingenuity with what we've learned from our encounter with the Zarkonians." Arjun Patel's work on decoding alien communication systems led to breakthroughs in quantum computing and instantaneous global communication. Even without traditional power grids, information began to flow freely around the world, connecting humanity in ways that would have seemed impossible before the invasion. But it wasn't just in the realms of science and technology that humanity found new strength. The shared experience of facing extinction had profound philosophical and spiritual impacts. New movements arose, emphasizing unity, resilience, and the importance of balancing progress with respect for the natural world. Zoe Rivera's art, once a tool of resistance, became a symbol of humanity's rebirth. Her massive murals, depicting scenes of struggle, triumph, and hope, adorned the rebuilding cities. They served as a constant reminder of what humanity had endured and overcome. 5 years after the Zarkonian invasion, Earth was a changed planet. Cities gleamed with a mix of restored classical architecture and alien-inspired innovations. Clean energy, derived from a fusion of human and Zarkonian technology, powered a society more harmonious and sustainable than ever before. But humanity's gaze was no longer confined to their home planet. The knowledge gained from the Zarkonian encounter had opened up the stars. The first human faster-than-light ship, fittingly named Phoenix, prepared for its maiden voyage. At the launch ceremony, President Carter, now serving as the head of the United Earth Council, addressed a global audience. 10 years ago, we faced annihilation. We were given 24 hours to surrender, to give up everything that made us human. Instead, we chose to fight, not just for our survival, but for our right to determine our own destiny. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the assembled crowd and the billions watching via holographic displays around the world. We lost much in that battle. Our cities, our technology, millions of precious lives. But we gained something far more valuable. We rediscovered our strength, our unity, our boundless capacity for adaptation and growth. The Zarkonians thought they were coming to conquer a divided, primitive species. Instead, they awakened a force they could never have imagined. As she spoke, the Phoenix rose majestically from its launch pad, its engines glowing with a combination of human determination and reclaimed alien technology. Today, as we take our first steps into the cosmic ocean, we carry with us the lessons of our past and the hopes for our future. We go not to conquer, but to explore, not to dominate, but to understand. The Zarkonians gave us 24 hours to surrender. We gave them, and the universe, an eternal lesson in the power of the human spirit. As the Phoenix streaked across the sky, becoming a bright star among countless others, a new chapter in human history began. The invasion that was meant to end humanity had instead propelled it to the stars, stronger and more united than ever before. On a hill overlooking the rebuilt skyline of New York, Zoe Rivera put the finishing touches on her latest mural. It depicted Earth, small and blue, cradled in human hands that reached out towards a star-filled galaxy. Below it, a simple phrase encapsulated humanity's journey and its hopes for the future. They came to end us. We chose to begin anew. As the sun set on this new Earth, casting a golden glow over a planet reborn, humanity looked to the future with hope, determination, and an unshakable belief in its own resilience. The Zarkonians had given them 24 hours to surrender. Humanity had given them, and the universe, a lesson for eternity.